Think about the last time you felt truly ashamed. Not embarrassed, not awkward, ashamed. The kind that doesn't stay in the moment. The kind that follows you home, replays at 2 a.m., sits behind your sternum for days like something lodged there that won't move. The kind where you don't just feel bad about what you did, you feel bad about what you are. Most people treat that feeling like a flaw, like something broken in the wiring, like their brain is betraying them by refusing to let something go. It isn't broken. It is one of the oldest and most precisely engineered survival mechanisms your species ever developed.
And the reason it still feels like dying 3,000 years after anyone last needed it to function the way it was built is because in the world it was designed for, shame and death were almost the same thing.
Picture a camp, 30,000 years ago. 15 people, maybe 20. Sleeping within reach of each other every night, sharing every fire, every kill, every meal. Living at a margin so thin that one person's failure could redistribute itself as everyone's hunger. In that world, your reputation was not a social luxury. It was a survival asset, as real and as critical as a sharpened spear or a known water source. Your ability to eat, to be protected, to find a mate, to survive illness, every single one of these things depended not on what you could do alone, but on what the group was willing to do for you.
And what the group was willing to do for you depended entirely on whether they trusted you. Reputation was oxygen, and shame was the moment the group started to question whether you deserved to breathe it.
Here's what the research says happened in the body when that moment came. Social neuroscientist June Price Tangney at George Mason University has spent 3 decades mapping the difference between guilt and shame at the neurological level. Her findings are striking. Guilt, she found, is specific. It attaches to a behavior. I did something bad. It motivates repair, apology, correction, making things right.
Shame is different. Shame is not about the behavior. It is about the self. I am bad. And instead of motivating repair, it triggers a completely different response, one that looks, at the neurological level, almost identical to the response triggered by physical threat. The brain floods with cortisol. The social monitoring centers go into overdrive. The self-evaluation systems, the parts of the brain responsible for modeling how others see you, activate at a level that researchers describe as consuming. You stop thinking about the future. You stop thinking about solutions. You think, with extraordinary precision and intensity, about how you appear to the people around you. In the modern world, that response feels disproportionate and counterproductive. In the ancient world, it was exactly the right response to exactly the right threat. Because in a group of 15 people with no laws, no courts, no police, and no ability to survive alone, how you appeared to the people around you was not vanity. It was everything.
Anthropologist Christopher Boehm at USC has spent decades studying what he calls the reverse dominance hierarchy in hunter-gatherer societies, the way small-scale groups actively and aggressively maintained equality among their members. His research found that prehistoric bands had extremely sensitive mechanisms for detecting and responding to violations of social norms. The mechanisms weren't formal. There were no judges, no written laws, no prisons. Instead, the group used something far more powerful and far more immediate. Gossip, ridicule, social withdrawal, ostracism. The person who violated the group's trust, who stole food, who failed to share, who lied, who acted in a way that threatened the group's functioning, didn't get arrested. They got watched, then talked about, then slowly excluded. And here is where the shame response becomes terrifyingly logical. Because ostracism in that world was not a social inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Researcher Kipling Williams at Purdue University has conducted hundreds of studies on the psychological effects of social exclusion. He found that being ostracized activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the same brain region that processes physical pain. The same region, you'll remember, that fires when a bone breaks. Your brain does not distinguish between being excluded from a group and being physically injured. In the ancient world, it shouldn't have. Being excluded from the group in a world with no lone survival option was functionally fatal. The brain learned to treat the two things as equivalent because they were equivalent. Shame was the brain's early detection system for ostracism. It fired before the exclusion fully happened, giving you a chance to correct, to repair, to pull yourself back from the edge before the group made a decision that couldn't be undone. It hurt so much because it needed to.
But here is the layer of this story that almost nobody examines. Because the shame response, the overwhelming, all-consuming, can't-stop-thinking-about-it quality of deep shame, was not just a private internal event. It was visible. And that visibility was the entire point.
Psychologist Atcher Keltner at UC Berkeley has studied shame displays, the physical behaviors that accompany shame, across cultures that have had no contact with each other. What he found was extraordinary. Across unrelated cultures, on opposite sides of the planet, the physical display of shame is almost identical. Gaze averted, shoulders slumped, head lowered, body made smaller. This is not learned behavior. It is not cultural transmission.
It is a species-wide signal, and it evolved, Keltner argues, not primarily as an internal emotional experience, but as a communication to the group. The shame display was a message. It said, I know I violated the norm. I am not a threat. I am not defiant. I am not challenging the group's authority over my behavior. I am smaller now. I acknowledge what I did. Please don't remove me. And the group, in most cases, understood that message. Boehm's research across dozens of hunter-gatherer societies found that public shame, the visible acknowledgement of wrongdoing, was in most cases sufficient to restore someone's standing in the group. Not always. Some violations were too severe, some individuals too persistent. But for the ordinary failures, the selfishness, the carelessness, the moment of weakness that everyone in a group of 15 people would eventually have, the display of shame was enough. You showed the group that you understood the weight of what you had done. The group watched, assessed, and in most cases, absorbed you back.
What happened to the ones who couldn't feel it? This is where the story turns dark. Boehm found that individuals who repeatedly violated group norms without displaying shame, who showed no visible acknowledgement, no posture of contrition, no behavioral signal that they understood what they had done, were treated very differently from those who did.
First, gossip. The group talked about them loudly and constantly, ensuring that everyone knew. Then ridicule, public mockery designed to force the display of submission that wasn't coming voluntarily. Then withdrawal. People stopped sharing food with them, stopped including them in decisions, stopped sitting near them. Then, if all of that failed, exile. And in some cases, documented across cultures, in situations where exile wasn't possible or didn't work, execution. Not violence for its own sake, execution as a last resort, performed by the group collectively in situations where one individual's persistent defection was placing the survival of everyone else at risk. The group did not do this easily. It was a last resort, but it was a real resort.
Your shame mechanism evolved to make sure you never pushed it that far. The pain, the consuming self-focus, the inability to let it go, the replaying at 2 a.m., none of that is your brain malfunctioning. It is your brain running a very old program, scanning the group's response, calculating the damage, modeling every person who witnessed what you did, and estimating where you stand with each of them. This is ancient social accounting software, and it runs whether you want it to or not.
Now think about what happens when that system runs in the modern world. You say something awkward at a dinner party. You send an email with the wrong tone. You forget someone's name in a meeting. You post something that doesn't land the way you intended. And your brain, your ancient, magnificently calibrated, 30,000-year-old brain, treats it like you have just endangered your survival, because it doesn't know the difference. It knows one thing: the group's response to what you just did does not feel entirely safe. And so the system activates, the cortisol fronts, the self-monitoring overdrives, the replay begins. The dinner party is not a tribe of 15 people who control your access to food and protection, but your nervous system processes it exactly as if it were.
The shame you feel is not disproportionate. It is perfectly proportionate to a world that no longer exists. And the reason it still feels like dying is because for most of the time your species has been alive, shame and dying were a question of degree, not kind. The tribe made shame feel like death, because for a very long time, that is exactly what it was.